Welcome again. I'm Dr. Cheron Davis from the College of Education at Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, and I'm an assistant professor of reading education, and this is our final boot camp for the language arts and reading section of the FTCE subject area exam. And so today our final, we're gonna, the plan was to take a look at the final components of the test, some of the final competencies, and to go over a few practice questions. So I wanted to practice some questions with you so that you can see how the questions are designed and what type of thinking you might need to have when going into the exam. Hi, Imani. And so the final, glad to have you on. And so our final, the final competencies that we're going to take a look at involve assessment, genres, and literature in general. And so a lot of this information, of course, you know, this will, some of this you'll remember from 3013, but a lot of this, particularly our College of Ed, our FAMU College of Ed students, you might remember this from your children's literature class or your language arts class. And so those are some good resources to pull out, or even your RED 3013, your 3013 book may be a good one to pull out to just refresh your memory. But we're gonna refresh our memory together. So I'm gonna go ahead and start screen share, and we're gonna get right down to it with assessments first. And I don't see them. So there we are. All right, here's what I'm going to share. All right, so classroom assessments, you know that assessment is very, very important. Those of you who have taken, oh geez, our FAMU students, you know that your assessment course, or RED 3013, gives you kind of the background. And then once we get into 4519 and 4800, there are a lot of opportunities for you to practice what you've learned. And so assessment is really, really important in reading. It takes a lot of planning. Teachers need to monitor, evaluate, and reflect. And in thinking about these assessments, you'll find that assessment is key to literacy instruction. In fact, you'll find that a lot of schools use that as the measurement tool to assess how well the students are doing, but also how well the teachers are doing. And so it's important that you have a really good assessment, you have really good assessment tools and assessment strategies in place. High stakes testing, it's what everybody talks about. It's the way our schools pre-COVID-19 have been scored, or at least partially, using high stakes testing. Here in our state, we use the FSE. Is it the FSA? The FSA. In other states, it depends on what it is. Again, there are problems with that. They are standardized. There are lots of politics involved. In fact, we can even say there are politics involved with this high stakes test that you're practicing for, right? The Florida Teacher Certification Exam. And so there are a lot of issues surrounding it. The big idea here is that they're here, and you're probably, for lack of a better tool, going to be required to use them. So it's important to know as much as you can about them so that they are not an inhibitor for your student success, and so that this test is not an inhibitor for your success, right? Because you can pass this thing. Portfolio assessment is collecting work in portfolios. It involves student self-assessment, so students are able to choose the work that they'd like to use in their assessments, and it showcases students' best work. So if you think about it in terms of perhaps a writing sample. If you remember in 4519, you took a writing sample at the beginning, middle, and end of the semester from the student. And so you were able to evaluate those writing examples and look at student improvement so that the student's not compared to anyone else, but you're able to compare their prior work to later work and what types of improvements they've made. It would be the same thing as your task stream portfolio. So your task stream holds collections of your work from across your educational career at FAMU. And so if you took the portfolio into, let's say, a job interview or perhaps a professional development, you're able to show, you have a collection of your work, a sample, so that someone would be able to see what types of projects and information you've been able to gather over the course of your tenure at FAMU. Some of the current trends, the No Child Left Behind Act, you know that that's out the window. This is a little outdated. You know that the big move is on standards, right? I'm trying to look and see what you all said. Formal assessments are, they're formal and informal assessments. Norm reference tests include standardized tests. They have to be checked for validity and reliability. Some of the terms that you need to understand are grade equivalent, percentile rank, stay 9. And these are a lot of the terms that you learned in the assessment course, right? So criterion reference tests are objective referenced, and they're based on performance standards, okay? So it determines what a student can do. It can help with prescribing appropriate instruction, yet there's no competition with other students. Some of the disadvantages to criterion reference tests is that it can make reading appear to be nothing more than a series of skills, right? And there's difficulty in establishing appropriate standards. And if you know me, you know I do a lot of multiculturalism and critical race theory and critical thought about text, such that it doesn't lend itself to one particular answer. So it's very difficult with reading, because reading is while it is a series of skills, it's also an act. It's also something that students engage in. And so testing their skills in that sometimes takes away from that, if you will. So it can make reading appear to be nothing more than a series of skills. Informal assessments require observations, typically use rubrics, portfolio assessments, self-appraisal, self-evaluations. You've done those. Appraising literary interest. If you're not reading something that you're interested in, you're probably not going to want to read it, or you're going to read it very differently than you would something that you want to read. And then informal tests. You need anecdotal records. If you remember, I would, during 4519, while you all were tutoring students, I'd walk around with my sticky notes, right? And I'd write sticky notes and leave them with you if I saw something happening that needed attention, or if it was a time where I could intervene. I would intervene, and then we talk about it later in our debriefing after the little ones were out of the room. Those are ways of assessing you. So it doesn't require me to give you a grade each day, right? But in the moment, I am assessing you. And it's a tool of informal assessment. Maybe checklists, ratings, rubrics, conferences, interviews. We did those together. We sit and we talk about your performance. You talk about what went right, what went wrong. Retellings. That debriefing period, whether you realize it or not, was very, very important for all of us. And it's a very important tool to use in the classroom so that students reflect upon their own learning and their own work, okay? Informal test, you can use multimedia, you can test specific content or specific skills. Of course, these tests can be computerized. They are informal reading inventories that you may give, miscue analyses, and running records. And if you remember the miscue analyses, we did a lot of that in 4519, where we would examine the miscues that the students had and determine what it was that we needed to teach them based on the miscues. So if a student was consistently reading slowly and lacking comprehension, then we knew we needed to work on fluency. If a student kept pronouncing the oblique E correspondence as ah, right, we knew that we needed to work on the long O correspondence with that student. So we used the mistakes the student made to drive the later instruction. Running records were the way that we would do that oftentimes. And so a running record would be the teacher marking the student's reading of a passage, right? And we've got special marks that the teacher uses. You all know those. The special marks that the teacher uses to determine where the errors are. If students are substituting words, if they're inserting words that aren't there, right? Some of the advantages about to alternative assessments is that it offers teachers specific information. It offers them information about what actual strategies need to be taught. However, it's subjective and it can take a great deal of time. And we talked about that with regard to informal reading inventories. It's very hard for you as one teacher, one person, to perform informal inventories on every single student in your classroom. And one of the things that I kind of offered to you was that while you're in school and you're practicing, and there are pretty much, this is the place where you can mess up and not get fired, right? You're gonna get fired from the job. You have the opportunity to use those assessments with one student, practice it. The next semester you use those assessments with 2, 3, 4 students, right? More, so that when you're in a classroom, you as a teacher can decide when it's advantageous for you to use an informal reading inventory. So let's say you get a student, an ELL, who arrives, whose family just arrived from Venezuela, and he speaks very little English. Or perhaps he does speak English, but you're not sure where he is in reading. You can take that informal reading inventory during center time, or perhaps when students are, you know, at recess or at PE, and you can take that student aside and do that testing outside of the classroom instruction. And so it's a way for teachers, you as teachers, which you always have to do, to use the resources that you have to make the best decisions, right? Marie Clay, remember the concepts about print test? We talked about that on Monday. Concepts about print doesn't require the student to be able to read, but rather it's actually testing the students' concepts about print. Formative assessments are done during the instructional process. Summative assessments are end of instruction evaluations. That's the big idea. So formative assessments are typically, you're going to hear them called a lot today, progress monitoring. It's a continuous assessment. It's exactly what you did in 4519 as you continue to assess students on a daily basis. You did running records each day. They read to you each day. You do a miscue analysis each day in order to drive further instruction. So you're using what you find out on those formative instructions to drive later instruction. Summative assessment is the end, okay? It's what you would equate to the chapter quiz or the final exam or the midterm. Summative sums up everything that you've done, okay? Validity is the extent to which a test actually measures the skill, okay? So if a test is valid, it measures the skill that it is intended to measure, all right? Reliability is the degree to which a test provides a dependable, consistent measurement of something. So if the test, if you take the test one day and you make a 60, tomorrow you're not going to take the same test under different circumstances and make a different grade, right? So there has to be reliability within the test, that if you took this test over several periods, you would still make the same grade because it's testing what's intended to be tested and it's dependable, all right? Some of the testing items on a reading test would be comprehension, vocabulary fluency, of course, phonemic awareness and phonological awareness and phonics, the big 5, right? But also language development, concepts of print, which doesn't require them to, which doesn't necessarily require the student to know how to read, but rather know the concepts of print. What are letters? Where's the front of the book? Where's the back of the book? Where's the first page? Can you point to a word on the page? Oral reading rate, or words per minute, WPM, is more of a fluency exam, and we know that Dibbles is really good at scoring that. There's several others, but Dibbles is the one that you'll hear most often. And then also letter knowledge. Students need to know letters, and there's also a letter naming fluency exam for them, right? Here are a list of some of the reading assessments, some of the ones that you probably heard of more often that are more familiar to you are the basic reading inventory, right? The developmental reading assessment, Dibbles, dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. What else? Which one do you? The QRI, qualitative reading inventory. We do a lot of that one in class, and using the using the reading passages and the word list to gauge where students need to start, and then also looking at the errors that they make. Doing an analysis of their errors is really important. Okay, an overview of some of the assessments: the DIBELS exam, screening and progress monitoring. It's doing the oral reading rate, right? It's checking for, or it can't, but the examiner can, for rate, automaticity, accuracy, and prosody, right? And what they'll do is they'll give the child a cold read, or what the teacher will do is give the child a cold read a passage for 60 seconds, and then they record the words correct per minute, okay? The DRA is diagnostic. It focuses on pretty much all of the big five, language development and concepts of print. So it's an all-encompassing exam. The comprehensive reading inventory and the diagnostic assessments of reading are both very comprehensive. They cover all of the big five, including, well, language development. It doesn't do language development, but the concepts of print, the oral reading rate, pretty much covers everything in those exams. And again, these are commercial exams, so these are things that would have to be purchased, right? The early reading diagnostic assessment, Rigby Reads. One of the big ideas here is that it's critical for you to do assessments, right? Assessment is critical. You have to plan for intervention. And as a classroom teacher, you're going to need to know which types of assessments to use in order to assess those different skills, okay? So we're going to move right into are there any questions? Yes, Amani, are there any questions? Hey, Amani. I know you don't want to talk, but.
No, it's just I have I'm riding in the car. The music is loud. But,
oh, okay. It's okay. Of course. You have to jam on, sis. But just make sure. Yeah, jam on. Make sure you're listening.
I think I'm the only one here, but.
Yeah, you are, and it's okay. I'm glad you're here. I'm thrilled that you're here.
I need it though, because I passed everything else, but I came to you in your office and I told you that the language arts. I don't know why I'm still not getting that one.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the genres, and I'm going to go through types of literature, literary types and terms, and then we're going to do a few practice questions together.
Okay.
And I think maybe looking at how you think about the questions and how you think through them might be helpful as well. Okay.
Can you check your phone real quick? Because I think I text you, but I have 2 Dr. Davis in my phone.
You did, and I'm going to text you back. You text me, I'm going to get back with you. All right. So, literary genres.
Yeah, I need the help.
It's okay. I got you. We're going to do it. The genres, and you may remember a lot of this information from children's literature.
I learned all of this in my internship. I learned these from the kids.
Really? And you know what? So much of this is when you're in the classroom and when you're actually practicing it, it makes so much more sense. Honestly.
Yeah. I meant to tell you too, I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah, we're taping this. It's going to be on YouTube, right? So let's tell the world that Amani's going to be a kindergarten teacher. I'm excited. You can look back at this years from now when you're a college professor and know that you were a kindergarten teacher. No, ma'am. So let's talk about. Very good, Amani. I'm very, very proud of you. I'm going to talk to you after this on my regular phone.
I'm going to go back on mute.
Okay. Genres. There are many categories to stories and books. Isn't this the fun of like literally our virtual world now? I mean, you can hear all our conversations, but this is great. This is what we do in class because we have to talk through these things, right? So some common genres: short stories, novels, plays, biographies, folk tales, myths, parables. So we're going to take a look at some of the definitions, okay? So poetry emphasizes the line as a unit. The page format may look different than any other book. It may or may not have a rhythm, but it tells a story in verse. And here's the big idea. It creates a mental picture. So poetry is really about the visual, creating this visual picture. And some poems may or may not have a picture to go with them, but they're very vivid, right? So the big idea to remember with poetry is that it tells a story in verse and that it's very vivid. Short stories are a brief fictional narrative. Remember, narratives are stories. They have beginning, middles, and end. It includes a plot, character, setting, point of view, and theme. Novels are book-length fictional prose. And novels are just books. They're much longer, so they're more in depth. They're what you may hear called trade books, chapter books, same thing, right? Plays or dramas, they're usually performed. Most can be divided into a tragedy or a comedy, but they include lines of dialogue and stage directions. That's really important to remember too. So it's not only going to include the dialogue, but it also includes directions for, you know, where he moves, what the emotion should be from the character, that type of thing. Biographies are account of a person's life. You see that they included a biography on me. Yes, Beyonce. No, I'm just kidding. I included my biography here. It can be short or long. It's nonfiction because it is about a person's life. And it can be authorized or unauthorized. So it may be a book that someone has written that they have permission to write, or they may not. Now, autobiographies are the story of a person's life written by that person, okay? It can be short or book length, and of course, it's a nonfiction book. Now, some of the subgenres are folk tales. Folk tales are anonymous traditional stories that are passed down orally long before they were written down. The author is usually anonymous, and some folk tales explain the origin of things. So Paul Bunyan is an example of a folk tale. They're typically very hyper realistic, right? Some of the things may be exaggerated, if you will, kind of like a long written hyperbole, but they explain the origin of something. Myths are traditional stories that deal with gods, goddesses, heroes, and supernatural events. The most well-known myths are ancient Greek and Roman myths, okay? Fables are short, usually a simple tale that teaches a moral and sometimes uses animal characters. The fox and or not the fox and the hare, what was the one about the race? The tortoise and the hare? Yeah. There's another one. I can't think of the name of it. A fable. If you ever heard of Miss, what is it? Gosh, I can't think of it. It's by Patricia McKissick. Flossie and the Fox. That's another one. That's a really good fable, right? Oh, I'm trying to look at.
Oh, I said, is the city mouse and the country mouse a fable?
The city mouse and the country. Yes, thank you. See, I need more people on here. I need you all. Yes, your mind is great. The fables, the city mouse and the country mouse, another type of fable. So just remembering that they're usually short, simple tales that teach a moral. Now, parable is a story in prose or verse that illustrates a religious idea or philosophical idea. It differs from a fable because it doesn't include animals, and the animals, everything is human in the parables, okay? Science fiction is fiction dealing with the impact of a real science or imaginary super science on human or alien societies of the past, present, or future. Mystery suspense creates a feeling of curiosity, uncertainty, or dread about what's going to happen. Fantasy is a type of fiction that's highly imaginative. It's in a non-existent world. The plot may have magic or supernatural powers, and the characters may have superhuman powers. So Harry Potter would be a great example of that. An adventure story is a literary work that the action is the main event. And so an adventure novel focuses on a main character who's on a mission and is facing many challenges and choices during that mission. Okay, now we're going to hop on to literary elements. because we need to also know the elements of the stories. So a short story is an imaginative piece that can be read in one sitting. Examples are Full Circle, The Cast of Amontillado. These are short stories that can be read in one sitting, right? They differ from books. They're not in books. The short stories are going to be one-pagers. The narrator is the person telling the story. So the narrator exists within the world of the story. The narrator may tell the story from his or her own point of view or from the point of view of one of the characters in the story. The setting is, of course, where the story takes place. The characters are the individuals that participate in the literary work. It can be people or animals. Typically, there's a protagonist and an antagonist in narrative stories. The protagonist is the central or the main character or hero, and it's usually the one with whom the audience identifies. The antagonist is the character or force against the main character. So it can be a force of nature, it can be some aspect of society, it can be a person. I'm thinking of the antagonist now, and all I'm thinking is Disney movies. Ursula, because my son is terribly afraid of the song Poor Unfortunate Souls and doesn't want me to sing it.
Like Hans and Frozen.
Yes, yes. In Frozen, and who is it in The Lion King?
Mufasa. I mean, not Mufasa.
Scar is the antagonist.
Mufasa's the king, but
Mufasa is
the
the protagonist. Exactly. And so in these narrative stories, you're going to find that most times there's going to be some type of antagonist. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be an animal, a force of nature, someone who is against that character. Good morning, Dr. Shakir. How are you? The dynamic character is going to experience an essential change in personality or attitude. So this usually involves some change in the surroundings, in the conditions, and you'll see the character grow and develop because of the whatever they've had to experience. So the dynamic character is the one that's probably going to change the most. The static character is the one that remains unchanged from the events. So dynamic changes, static remains unchanged, right? The round character is fully developed by the author. So physically, mentally, emotionally, you as the reader will know exactly what's happening with that one because they've given such detail to this character. And then the flat character is the one who doesn't undergo any changes either, okay? Characterization is the methods that a writer uses to develop characters. So the writer may use many methods to develop a character's personality, their physical appearance, their thoughts, feelings. A narrator can make a direct comment about it, about the character, or it can be indirect, developing the character through other characters. So maybe a sister or a brother sees his brother as very hateful or mean-spirited, or and that may shape the character for you. So characterization can happen by either be developed by the character themselves or through other characters in the story. Direct characterization is when the writer tells the audience what the character is like, and then indirect allows the reader to draw his or her own conclusion by showing the character acting or speaking, giving a physical description, revealing the character's thoughts. And indirect characterization is what you'll be asked to do even on even in you all probably have already taken it, the reading GK, when they'll ask you what's your opinion, or what do you think the author's opinion is of this person, and it'll probably be based on something that the character says or does versus them saying this character is really heartbroken. It may describe the character crying or sobbing for days or being listless, right? And it's your job to infer, which is a higher order thinking skill, and it's comprehension skill. It's the reader's job to infer that that's an indirect characterization of the character. Does that make sense? Direct characterization, the patient boy and quiet girl were both well-mannered. So the author's basically telling you about them, versus indirect, when they talk about their thoughts, their effect on others, what other people around them are thinking of them. what does the character do? How does the character look? If they describe the character as, you know, I don't know, I said listless already, maybe perky and very animated and very excited, you may assume that the character is happy, right? The theme is the central idea or message in a work of literature. Most themes are implied rather than explicitly stated, and that's a lot of what you, those of you who have, and you, I know you've probably already taken it, the Reading GK, yeah. There are a lot of theme questions, finding the main idea, the central idea. Imagery are descriptive words and phrases that recreate sensory experiences, and it's also, if you're putting everything together, it's also a comprehension skill, right? Creating mental images. And so even in the author's description, students or readers are supposed to be creating a mental image. And that's what we as reading teachers are teaching children to do, right? An allusion is an indirect reference made to another literary work. For an example, Dr. King alluded to the Gettysburg Address when he talked about having a dream. People listening were reminded of 77 years ago. And if you think about allusion, it also rolls back into comprehension strategies, right? So making connections. Remember, there are 3 types of connections a reader can make: text to, yeah, kiss your brain, you got it.
Text to text, text to self, and text to world.
Amen. No. You got it. There you go. Kiss your brain. 3 types of connections that a reader can make. And so allusion kind of alludes to that, right? That readers are always trying to make connections to the text about things that they already know or have background knowledge about. The plot is the sequence of events in a story. Exposition is information essential to understanding the work. So any of the background knowledge that you need to understand it, it usually occurs at the beginning of the story. And if the exposition doesn't occur at the beginning of the story, as teachers, we know that prior to reading a text, students understand more if they have a working knowledge. So we provide comprehension activities that give them background knowledge. KWL charts, activating background knowledge, providing pictures or stories to supplement, right? So the exposition is the background story. The rising action is the event, okay, that moves the plot along. The climax is the moment when the interest and emotional intensity reach their highest point. So it's the turning point of the story. It's the high point, right? It's typically the point where if it's a really good series on TV, the climax is where they leave us that week and make us wait for another week to find out what happened. That's what, if any of you watch, not This Is Us, this is what they do to us every week. They leave, and probably, I probably think the same thing about the show with the doctors on it. I don't know, it's the Thursday night show, y'all love it. I think they do that on there as well. The falling action is the resolution. So the conflict has been resolved, right? And then there's the conflict, which can be external or internal conflict. So the conflict of a character may have to do with other characters, nature, an outside force. So it can be person to person, person versus society, or person versus nature. An internal conflict would be a struggle that a character has with his or her own conscience. So the external conflict would be an outside force, person, nature. Internal would be the struggle within their own conscience. Figurative language, we've already talked about that. That's on yesterday's Zoom meeting. So make sure you watch the day before. Figurative language, we went through every type of those. Metaphors, we talked about metaphor examples. We did several of those. Similes, irony, suspense, foreshadowing, symbols, mood, all of these we went through. Personification, point of view. No, we didn't talk about point of view. We know that the point of view is the perspective from which the story is told. So the story can be told from first, second, or third person. The first person perspective is the story being told from one of the character's own vantage points. So it means someone in the story is telling the story from their own, through their eyes, right? Second person point of view is you. So you're telling the story, okay? The third person is the narrator, tells the story from the vantage point of she or he, right? So the narrator is telling, the third person is looking in and seeing everything that's happening in the story and telling everything that's happening in the story. Omniscient is an all-knowing observer. This person knows everything about every character. The person can comment on what the characters think, what they feel. It's like they have an inside view to every character. Limited third person is from the point of view of only one character. So only one character is able to tell the story, okay? So now that we've gone through these, we are going to practice a few sample items and kind of talk through these, because perhaps this may be helpful for some of you, just talking through how you're answering these questions and how you're thinking about them. So make sure you take a second, and all of this is, you can find this online. Literally, there are lots of sample tests. These sample questions come from the DOE, but there are lots of different sample questions and tests you can take. In fact, I found one website, the Study Stack, and these are mostly cards with definitions on them. So understanding, and like I told you, a lot of the questions on this exam they involve you looking at a classroom situation and selecting the best response. So knowing those steps of the writing process, knowing the difference between emergent, beginning, and fluent readers and writers, and what they can do at each stage, because they're going to give you a visual and ask you to use what you know to apply it to that situation, okay?
Yeah, I have a lot of the on my test, I have a lot of the writing process questions. They don't really ask about the reading.
Really?
Well, not that I've had. I've taken the language arts, like, I think this is going to be my 4th or 5th time now for not the subject, not the GK, but for the subject area.
The subject area.
They ask a lot of the writing process.
Well, make sure you look at yesterday's call, because on yesterday I did the writing process and went through what you should see at each stage of the writing process and how that works. So let's look at some of the answers and see if we might be able to work through those. So the most effective way to develop students' reading fluency is through repeated reading, choral reading, round robin reading, or reader's theater. What do you think?
Is it reading fluency is through repeated reading?
Yeah, and we actually talked about that on yesterday. Oh, no, on Mondays. No, yes, Mondays. Monday Zoom call. Repeated reading is recommended, and so it's one of the things that you might remember me telling you the story of one of my students who read No David every day, and I was like, put that book down because he wanted to see David's butt. And now, in retrospect, although I am the perfect teacher, right? No, I messed up. Like I should not have told him not to reread that book, because it's important for kids to reread books. And so now that I know better, I do better. My child even says to me, "Mommy, I already read that book." And I tell her, read it again. This time read it faster, right? Or this time I want you to use your mommy voice to read, right? So which of the following instructional strategies would be a good way to introduce a variety of genres to a class in order to compare and contrast information about a subject? Sign systems, read alouds, book clubs, or text sets? And this one is you're probably in limbo between read alouds and book clubs, perhaps. or no.
Is it,
Perhaps.
Is it read alouds?
You would think, wouldn't you? But think about but go back to the question. It asks you a good way to introduce a variety to the class in order to compare and contrast information about a subject. And so if you were doing that, how many more
text sets?
Right. Well, no, not text sets. You want, in order for them to compare and contrast information about a subject, you need for them to read several different genres.
So a book club?
Yeah, that would be the best way to get the most students reading. Do you see that?
I wouldn't choose that only because I wouldn't think that kids have book clubs.
I think the big idea, though, in this question is that they're asking you to introduce a variety of genres, which means several genres to several students. Okay. I think that's the big idea here. Rather than
that makes sense. I thought that I just didn't want to say it because I just, my mindset of book club was like older women, right in a book club,
and you really have to pay attention, like children doing that. You really have to pay attention to the way that they're wording the questions and what they're really looking for, because a lot of times, I told y'all, these tests, they come down to two answers that it may or may not be, and really looking at the question and what they're asking will give you a clue will lead you to the way that they want you to answer it. Even if you would do something else in real life, right? We're answering we're answering questions that again are standardized, and someone has selected what they feel would be the most appropriate answer, because I don't ever say correct, what it would be the most appropriate answer. And you got to decide what they think is the most appropriate answer based on the way they ask the question.
Yeah, but that's understandable, though. I understand that.
Okay, good. Let's look at this.
Book clubs?
Yeah, book clubs would be the answer for that one. Let's look at this one. What's the most effective method for teaching beginning first grade students who have had very little experience with print to read? Should we do instruction in language experience, instruction in context clues, instruction in linguistics, or instruction in phonics?
Instruction in phonics.
Exactly. I would say phonics too. And you might have been,
because
and those
they have
of you,
to do the phonics and the phonemic awareness.
Exactly. And because we're talking about a beginning first grade student, right? Yeah. So, and we know that they probably have not gotten all of those vowel correspondences down pat. It's important to focus on the instruction of phonics first. Now, for those of you who are thinking about selecting language experience, remember language experience approach is the teacher or the students narrate the text and the teacher writes it for them, okay? That's not going to be good for students who have very little experience with print, because even if you print what they say, they're not going to be able to distinguish those sight words or the sound of letter T if they were talking about a tiger that they saw at the zoo. So they need.
Is it phonics?
I'm sorry.
Well, I said, is it phonics graphemic or
graphophonic? Yes, yes. They need to be able, exactly. They need to be able to see the letters that correspond with the phone.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. You got it, girl. I want to get you. I'm not going to get you on here. We'll talk. We'll talk. You know this stuff. Which of the following is the best definition of oral reading fluency? Accurate reading of grade level text at a high rate with appropriate prosody. Accurate reading of connected text at a high rate with deep comprehension. Accurate reading of connected text at a conversational rate with appropriate prosody, or accurate reading of grade level text with appropriate prosody and deep comprehension.
D.
B, connected text.
I said D, like D as in dog.
Oh, D as in dog. So accurate reading of grade level text with appropriate prosody and deep comprehension.
Yes.
Is oral fluency.
Yes.
What other one might it be?
C. Wait. Yeah.
Though that would
Okay,
C and D would be the two
hold on,
that.
I gotta. Oh. Accurate reading of grade level text at a high rate with appropriate prosody, accurate reading of connected text at a high rate with deep comprehension, accurate reading of connected text at a pronunciation rate. Is it A?
No, I think I would, a student looking at this, or even you looking at this, just like your first answer was D, you would probably be choosing between D and C. And if you look at A and B both have a high rate of speed. Now, what happens when a kid's reading too fast?
They're not really making the connections.
They're not making connections between the text. And so if I was looking at the first two answers that said high rate, and I was thinking to myself, what would counter this high rate? Because the other two that I didn't choose said high rate. I would think the conversational rate would make more sense with regard to oral reading fluency.
Yeah.
Oral reading fluency doesn't include you being able to read as fast as possible. Okay, oral reading fluency also doesn't have anything. If you think about the factors of fluency that influence fluency, none of them are comprehension. Fluency has a goal of comprehension, but oral reading fluency is the rate, the accuracy, and the prosody.
They're able to talk about it.
Right, it's the prosody, the rate, and so fluency is a cause of comprehension, right? Or comprehension is an outcome, but comprehension does not have to be it's not the definition of fluency. Because you can be fluent and not comprehend. So which one of these answers would it be with that in mind? C. I would think C too. Yeah, and we're right. Yay. Good thing we're right? Good thing we're right. A classroom teacher working with low ability students uses repeated reading strategy for the purpose of improving reading fluency, determining fluency, right? If she's having them, if she's having a student repeat the reading, we know that repeated reading is a strategy for improving fluency. Fluency, being able to read fluently causes or has an effect on one's comprehension, but it's not the definition of fluency. Because you can be fluent and read a text and not understand anything it says. And I gave y'all several examples of those from my classrooms in second grade. I had my one date who stayed with me for several years and could read the newspapers and read the Globe and knew where all the capital cities were, and he couldn't tell you anything about what he read. He would tell you what him and his mama cooked for dinner the night before after he read a passage. So it doesn't have, it's important. It influences comprehension, but it's not comprehension. Repeated reading is most effective when accompanied by a peer providing complimentary feedback, adult providing corrective feedback, adult who listens to the reading, or peer who monitors the reading.
I really don't know this one.
Well, if a child is reading for fluency, which is for them to read accurately, read with prosody, with inflection, and to read at a good speed, what would be the most effective thing for them while they're doing the repeated reading?
B?
I think so too. Somebody providing corrective feedback, because that's going to give them an idea of what they should be doing, right? So if my daughter's reading a text and she comes to a question and it says, where are you going? Or she says, where are you going, says mom. I'll stop right there and I'll say, "Where are you going?" says Mom. Now say it that way. And then she'll read it that way, right? So giving them corrective feedback in the process is very important. Not just listening to them read, but correcting them. Read the following text. This exercise provides practice of what vocabulary skill? The knight will bow before the king. What does bow mean? And so bow, the reason we know that that's bow and not bow is because of how it's used in the sentence, right? So what type of word is that? So bow and bow are spelled the same, but they sound different. So two answers.
I know this.
Yeah, two answers we can immediately cut out. Antonyms and synonyms.
Yeah,
right?
that's not. Yeah, because I know it's homo.
Means
the same. Okay, and he said bow and bow.
Well, no. It says what is
Those
this? What is bow? What is bow in this sentence mean?
I'm just saying what you. I'm just saying because you said bow and bow. They have to spell the same. Okay, it's homographs. No.
Of course, stop second guessing yourself. Don't do that. Don't second guess yourself.
Yeah, because homographs is letters.
Exactly. Okay. Spell the same, they sound different. And you know this stuff. Don't second guess yourself. I bet you're doing that on your test.
Yeah, probably.
You better stop that. I'm not gonna fuss at you.
Yeah, because graph is the letters, phone is the sound.
And what are you doing by analyzing those words in that way? Do you remember? How are you analyzing those words?
Breaking them down.
By the
phonemic.
Not the phonemes. You're breaking them down by the smallest unit of meaning.
Oh yeah, that's ooh, I know that too.
Meaning
is morphemic.
You're doing morphemic analysis.
Analysis.
Yeah, you're doing a morphemic analysis. You're taking the morphemes and figuring out what each one of them means. So you're actually doing that. Okay? A teacher is having students rewrite their favorite fairy tale. As part of the assignment, the students must use a thesaurus. What processing skill is a teacher requiring students to use?
Morphemic awareness.
You sure?
No. Wait, no.
Because remember, morphemic analysis is analyzing.
A thesaurus? Okay, no.
Okay, hush, Dr. Davis, hush. Let you think.
Okay. Yeah, let me think. As part of this, experience in a few weeks, and I know.
Which two do we know it's not?
Semantic.
Well, we know it's not D, syntax, because syntax is the grammar, the order of words in a sentence. And we know it's not graphonemic, right? So it has to be
semantic.
Probably semantic. think about this. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning.
Yeah, okay? I know it's not graphonemic.
You know it's not
and I know it's not.
But it might be morphemes or semantics. Think about what morphemes are and think about what semantics are. Morphemes
I said morpheme the first time. And
yeah,
I know that morpheme is the meaning. And
no. Morpheme is not. Watch this. Morphemes are not just meaning. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning. Right? So in dogs, D-O-G-S, there are two morphemes, dog and S. The S makes dog mean something else. So an S could be a morpheme. ED is a morpheme. ER. Semantics are subtle shades of meaning. So when we talk about semantics is the difference between stir and mix. Semantics are the difference between moolah and bank, or cheese and I don't know, a band. It's the subtle shades of meaning, right? So if we're thinking about meaning as a whole, morphemes are the smallest units of meaning, but semantics are those subtle shades of meaning, the different meanings we have for money, those buttons on your blender, because we all just press them until we get the right consistency. But they all mean something different. There are like 7 or 8 of those bad boys on there. So they mean something different. We just don't know what they mean. So which one of these, if she's asking them to use a thesaurus, what processing skill will the students have to use?
Semantics.
Semantics. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's always going to be 2 that you're going to kind of
And I
dabble
think these are the
between.
questions right here that be messing me up.
Then they better not. Stop.
They are.
They can't. We can't do this. Okay,
but I get it. I understand though.
You get it?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Identify the word recognition method that could most effectively aid the pronunciation of the following words. Okay, so we're thinking about word recognition. That's being able to recognize immediately and quickly. Present, content, record, read. So would it be sight word, phonic analysis, structural analysis, or contextual analysis? Well, we can cut out 2 right in the beginning. We know that it's not sight words. Those are not sight words. And we also know that phonic analysis, none of them look alike. So phonic analysis wouldn't be it. So perhaps it's structural or contextual. Do any of the words really look alike?
Is it contextual?
It's contextual. Why would you say that?
Because all of the words, they can be pronounced in a different kind of way depending on the context of where the word is at. Because like present, you can say I presented something, or you can say I gave you a present.
Amani, why are you not teaching this boot camp?
But
that's what I want to know. Why are you why are you not teaching the boot camp, ma'am? Ma'am, I cannot wait to get off this call so I can call you and Okay, so which instructional method would help students categorize the following words? Shred, flake, crumble, bake, broil, fry, stir. We just talked about this.
What instructional method would help students categorize?
If they were categorizing these words.
Okay, shred, flake.
Think about the relationship of all the words.
It has to do with cooking.
Yeah. So if I had the word cook in the middle, and I could talk about ways to cook things. You could either bake them, broil them, fry them. I could talk about different methods or tools I could use, a mixer, a blender, a broiler. So what type of category, what type of strategy am I using? Okay, I'm sorry. Those subtle shades of meaning. Subtle shades of meaning.
Mapping?
Yeah, semantics. The subtle shades of meaning. Do you remember, and when you get to questions like these, remember the slide I had where we talked about furniture?
Mm-hmm.
Or better yet, do you remember the one we talked about mad? The word was mad in the middle. And off to the side, we had all these different ways of talking about phrases that we use to describe us being mad. So angry, peeved, ticked off, we had pissed off, we had perturbed, but then we had these words that we hadn't heard of: chafed, vexed, irate. We used all these different words, right? And so we talked about how there are these subtle shades of somebody can think that being infuriated is worse than being mad. Or being vexed is not quite as bad as being chafed at something, right? So we talked about the fact that semantically these words, it's a concept, but we have lots of different words that we can use for it. It's what all of us do when we're, writing. and you've used the word big too many times, you go straight to thesaurus, right? And it gives you all of these words that mean kind of the same thing, and you pick the one that best fits what you don't just pick anyone. You pick the one that best sounds like it really, really hits, you know, where you're trying to go with the sentence. That's semantic analysis.
Yeah.
And that's what kids are doing. That's what you're doing. That's what all of us are doing when we're using the thesaurus. It's also what I do when I'm trying to figure out what button to press on the blender.
Semantic analysis is the same as semantic map.
Yes, yes. The mapping is the visual.
Okay.
Analysis is you knowing and understanding that information, but the mapping is the visual that I use. Those big circles that I use, and I would put a word in the center, a concept in the center, and then we have words on the outside. So furniture might be the word, and you see a sofa, love seat. Yeah, but you also had Davenport. And I just saw last night one of my Facebook friends ask if anyone had a key for an old chifforobe that she had. She was one of my, I'm going to say it, she was one of my she was my first room mother for my second grade. And she asked for a key to the chifforobe. And I was so tickled that I knew what she was talking about. I didn't know exactly how it looked, but I knew it was a piece of furniture. And that came from teaching y'all. So I learned something new from myself every day. But that was, I mean, that was a really good, like I understood the concept of what I don't really know exactly what a chifforobe is, but I know it's a piece of furniture. Okay.
I think a chifforobe is it's like something you can put, it's the things that you can, it looks like it's not a chest, but it looks like it's the things that you put at the end of your bed, I think. And
really?
It opens up at a,
like opens this way, like vertically?
Yeah, like, yeah.
I thought it had something to do with
Never
like
mind.
a wardrobe. That's what I always think of. It's like a free closet. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. It could be. Everybody look up chifforobe right now.
I'm looking it up.
Okay. No, we're going to tell them, no, you don't do it. Everybody pause this recording and go look up chifforobe. It would be a good word for you to know, and then use it on everybody you see, okay? So next question for first grade students, the best strategy to encourage vocabulary development through writing is to have students, A, incorporate words from a list into their writing, use a thesaurus while writing, look up new words in a dictionary, or check their spelling frequently. So we know we can eliminate 2 already. The C and D are probably not going to be it. Vocabulary development through writing will we have them incorporate words or use a thesaurus? Now, both of these are strategies that could be used, but the question asks, what's the best strategy to encourage vocabulary development?
Use the thesaurus?
You think that's better than them incorporating words from a list into their writing? We do it. We use a thesaurus. We probably tell kids to do that. But if a child goes to a thesaurus and sees, think about all the words that we put into our writing that we looked up in a thesaurus. Do we use them every day?
No.
And we typically don't incorporate them into our writing later on unless we come to a word like that again and we need to go to the thesaurus. So them actually incorporating words from a list into their writing might be a better strategy. Not the only one, but a better strategy to encourage vocabulary development, okay? Are you okay with that? Sorry.
Like, okay, so when they say a list, they mean like a vocab list or something?
Yes, a list of words that they previously did not know. So this may be a list that the teacher has selected. Remember in vocabulary instruction, we talked about the fact that students need multiple exposures to words in order to learn them. You're not going to learn a word just because you see it one time. You need to have heard that word repeatedly. You need to have been able to use it in context. So the best way for you to incorporate those words into your writing is not for you to look them up and take them from a thesaurus, but rather from a list of words that you have to learn what those words mean in order to incorporate them into your everyday speech, writing, that type of thing. So if there's a list of words, if there's a list of words, you're more likely to reuse that word in writing during the week. I mean, think about your vocabulary list or a spelling list on the board. Your kiddos are more likely to write more sentences with that darn word than any other word on the any other word.
Yeah, that's true, because I've seen it.
He can play it. I don't know idea. Okay. So before students learn, next question. Before students learn about reading a time zone map, the teacher presents slides of her trip to Greenwich, England, where the meridian timeline is established by the British. The teacher then encourages discussion of the reasons for time zones and how they affect us. Which set of reading comprehension factors is demonstrated by this lesson? A, purpose and oral language. B, vocabulary, meaning, and automaticity. C, content skill development and prosody. Or D, background information and building concepts.
This is a good question.
Yeah, it is good. So she's presenting slides of her trip to England and showing where the meridian timeline was established.
Background information.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Absolutely. She's providing background information. So not just talking about timelines and how they affect.
She gotta do the
they're going to understand it very differently if they've actually seen a picture of, you know, the actual spot that she's talking about, or they know that so that they have some
the prior knowledge.
Exactly. Does that make sense? Of course it does.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff is having difficulty remembering details from the story he just read. What strategy would help him focus on details? So summarizing, recognizing text structure, visualizing, or questioning. So he's having difficulty remembering details. What strategy would help him focus on details? So thinking about Jeff, we can probably throw out summarizing and questioning off the top, right? So text structure.
Is it recognizing text structure?
Well, text structure could be it, or visualizing. And recognizing text structure, remember, text structure is typically used when students are reading expository text, like textbooks, maps, dictionaries, recipes, knowing how to read those particular types of text. If he's trying to remember details from a story, remember a story is a narrative, right? So the narrative is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. What's going to help you to remember details or focus on the details of a story? The text structure or visualizing?
Visualizing.
You see that? It's just a little deeper. When you get down to those two, get a little deeper into what they're asking you, okay? Because you can do this. Don't second guess yourself. But once you get down to the two that it might possibly be, really dig into what the question is asking, okay? So after students read a detective story in their basal reader, a teacher asks them to make a judgment about the guilt or innocence of the main character. What type of thinking is the teacher encouraging? Divergent, evaluative, literal, or convergent?
Evaluate?
I would say evaluate too. Yeah, good thing we're right.
Okay. So is there a such thing as the divergent and convergent?
I wouldn't think so. I would think you're really choosing between literal and evaluative. And
Okay,
literal wouldn't,
know.
Literal wouldn't be the answer if you're asking the students to judge the guilt or innocence of the character, because that means they're having to make a decision about something or an inference about something in the text. So I think it would be between evaluative and literal, and I would say evaluative.
Yeah, and
So
evaluatives on Bloom's.
Yeah, we is it? Oh yeah, it sure is.
It's at the top.
It sure is. You know, I never look at it, so I always forget. That's y'all's stuff. Y'all always remind me of that in class.
As much times I took this test, I know what the Bloom's taxonomy is.
If you don't pass this test next, I'm not going to talk about that on this recording. I'm going to talk to you about that later. Which of the following tasks is best for representing a sequence of events in a second grade language arts classroom? A picture, a diorama, a podcast, or a timeline?
Timeline.
I would say timeline too. Yeah, timeline would be the best one. A teacher's having his students locate who, where, when, why, and how in a newspaper story. This activity will help the students develop which of the following reading skills: creative reading, literal reading, critical reading, or word recognition?
Teacher.
There's really only one that it could be. Because the teacher's having the students locate
Critical reading?
Do you have to be critical to figure out who is the main character in the story? You have to be critical to discover where it took place. You have to be critical to discover how something happened in the story. No, all you have to do is read the story. So if you think about, and once again, if you go back to the question, it says the teacher is having his students locate this information in a newspaper story. If they have to locate it, they have to actually pick it out. That doesn't mean they're thinking critically about anything. They're not reflecting on anything. They are finding it. And so those would be what type of skills? Literal, right? You get that?
No.
You don't get that?
What is literal reading? Like, what is that?
Literal reading skills are you being able to find, a student being able to find things that are actually in the text. So a literal reading skill is being able to identify the main character in a story. That doesn't take any type, that's a literal reading skill. Like fundamentally, you should be able to do that if you're able to read the text. A critical reading skill would be, how do you know that the character was sad in the story? Because the story's not going to say, this character is sad. How do you know? Oh, I knew because she was crying here. I knew because she ran out of the house. I knew because... That's you having to dig in and use comprehension skills, critical comprehension skills. But finding out who, where, when, how in a newspaper story, all of that's literal. If you read a newspaper story or a magazine article,
it's going to be automatically there. It's
just going to be there. And it's up to you to be able to find it or locate it. And I think locate is like I said, locate is the telling is really, it tells you what they're looking for, because the teacher's having his students locate this information. That means it's in there and they just got to go find it. So it's literal. Okay, does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Willa is a potentially at-risk emergent reader or learner who lacks exposure to literature. The most effective activity for her to engage in is teacher read aloud, reading from grade level basals, selecting books from the classroom library, or watching educational television. Now, before you answer, let's go back to the question, okay? Before you say, Willa is a potentially at-risk emergent learner. So we got to think about what an emergent reader is able to do. What are emergent readers able to do? Who are emergent readers?
They are like, they're just beginning.
So they're still learning alphabet.
Yeah.
They aren't able to read. They don't have the phonics. They don't have the alphabetic principle down, right?
I think the answer is A.
Yes, this child is potentially at risk, which means that they haven't been exposed to a lot of literature. So what's going to be the most effective activity for her to engage in?
Well, yeah, I think it's yeah.
I think it is too. I think you're right.
Because read alouds, they'll be able to hear the story and everyone can collaborate and talk about it and stuff like that. But yeah,
oral language practice, you can ask the student literal questions, and two, students, their listening comprehension is much greater than their reading comprehension most times up until later grades, right? They're able to listen and understand a lot more than they're able to read on their own, which is why you can read a story to a 3-year-old and they can tell you what you read, but they may not be able to read the words. Okay, so that's going to be the best. See, you are doing this. Which literary device is being used when inanimate objects or abstract concepts are seemingly endowed with human characteristics?
Personification.
You got that one really quick. Yeah, personification.
I learned that during my internships.
Did you?
Yeah, literally all of the figurative language. I learned all of that because when I was in school, I really only remembered metaphor and simile. But because of the internship, I literally learned all of the figurative language.
Really?
So I always tell my teacher I'm so thankful for that, because
I love that you're throwing me under the bus right now, and we do a whole game with figurative language with with the Biggie Smalls and the I had a wreck and I see how the Mercedes Benz, the pun. I love how you're throwing me under the bus right now. Like I didn't do this. And for everyone who's listening, go to yesterday's Zoom call and you'll see we talked about figurative language too again, and just went through all of the and again it's a lot easier to incorporate into your psyche when you do it versus just hearing it. So I understand why it's more memorable to you having done it in a classroom with students, because that's where it comes from. That's where it makes sense. Okay, so this question, directions for characters, is an example of an element frequently found in drama, poetry, realistic fiction, or science fiction. Now go back to the question, directions for characters. So giving the characters directions is found frequently in
drama.
That's what I would say. I say drama too, and I'm glad we said the correct answer. Good. Last summer, a student read a fact-based book about the life of Rosa Parks. The literary genre of this book
is a biography.
Yeah, I would say biography. Very good, and that's all the genre stuff that we went over today. By definition, poetry should contain rhyming words, short lines, soothing rhythms, or vivid images.
Should contain
Well, we know they don't all have to have rhyming words, right?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that. Vivid images?
I would say vivid images. Yeah. It's got to create a mental picture, right? Because the lines are shorter. It doesn't have to be written in a narrative format. It can be. But what all poetry has in common is that it creates vivid images. A third grade teacher reads an informational nonfiction text about frogs and a fictional narrative about frogs. He wants his students to write an expository piece about facts and details to compare and contrast the two. Which of the following graphic organizers would be best to compare and contrast the two? And I think we kind of
Venn diagram.
Yeah, the Venn diagram, our trusty Venn diagram we've used. What about one of the methods for improving a reader's attitude toward reading? Placing all of the students in the same book, placing students in books at the appropriate reading level, providing peer tutors, or providing opportunities for oral reading?
Providing.
One of the best methods for improving reading.
Opportunities for oral reading
would improve a reader's attitude towards reading.
Oh, okay, wait. Place students in books at their appropriate reading level?
That's what I would choose. Let's see if we're right. Yeah, there you go. See how it helps you when you go back and read the question, read the answers, and then go back and read the question again. I think that's very helpful for you in understanding what the question is actually asking. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. Okay, so which of the following describes what happens in the graphophonic component of writing? Students learn how to form letters correctly. They learn how to organize ideas. They learn that one sound may be formed in a number of different ways, or they learn that words are made up of letters that represent objects and ideas. So now we're going to go back. Which of the following describes what happens in the graphophonic component of writing?
I
We're
know.
thinking about graphophones.
I'm gonna just message it. I'm sorry, Miss Shakir. That's me. I'm in the car.
Okay, you know what? You can actually mute, and I'll just go through the questions, and you can kind of, if you have a question, you can come on and ask.
It's fine to talk. You just need to kill your radio.
Oh yeah, I'm not the one.
Because remember, Miss Bryant will edit. She'll scrub it down, but it's hard for her to scrub down the background sound.
Okay, no problem. I'm gonna just go on mute. I'm gonna still answer the question.
No, the talking is good. We don't want you to stop talking. Just kill your radio. Thank you.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, you're fine. We want you to, because that helps you with learning the concept. So
it really does.
Talk. I just need you to turn your. I'm in a concert now.
Is it better now?
It is. It's better.
Yes, yes.
It's better.
Look,
I love what you're listening to, so I'm okay.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm doing my footnotes, I put on just some monotonous something to so I get the music while you're working, but because we're recording, we have to have the background sound down. Unfortunately, we don't have the latest equipment that we could filter all that out.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. My apologies.
That's okay. So which of the following describes what happens in the graphophonic component of writing?
Okay.
So we know that.
I know it's not B or C.
There you go. So we are really choosing between A and D. Let's think. They learn how to form letters correctly, or they learn that words are made up of letters.
It's D.
Now see, I would choose A.
Okay, it was in my mind, but I felt.
Wait, no.
But I said D because when you have your graphemes, you're making a connection with the letter and
sound. Yes, yeah. I think it's D now. I'm gonna agree with you. Let's see if we're right.
C. Students learn that one sound may be formed of a number of different ways.
Let me think about that one. Students learn that one sound, and I'm sure it's talking about like digraphs and
it makes sense.
Songs. Yeah, you can form F in several. I mean, the sound can be formed with an F, PH, an OUGH or GH. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, we missed that one. It's okay. Everybody thought we were perfect. I mean, we make mistakes, right? There we are. Which of the following modes of writing is intended to provide information and include facts and data? Descriptive, narrative, expository, or persuasive?
To provide information and facts and data is expository.
I would say expository too. Yay, we got that one right. See, we're back on our perfect run. We got this. You know what we're doing. Which developmental stage of writing does Amy exhibit when she writes a string of standard letters from left to right on her paper?
I know this. Emergent. Or
I would say emergent as well, only because she's not writing words. She's just writing standard letters. So I'm going to say emergent as well. There we go. Yeah. If she was writing a sentence, and even if she used, let's say she wrote a sentence with lots of, what do you call it?
Wiggly lines?
not squiggly lines, but rather she used invented spelling. Then we could go to beginning, because she's trying to apply the alphabetic principle. Whereas here, Amy just writes a string of standard letters.
Yeah, but she knows that writing goes from left to right, so that's why it's emergent.
Exactly. Student writes about a dog. Which of the following skills should the teacher's primary focus be when conferencing with the student about writing? This is a good one for your kindergarten class. What would you focus on with this student based on the way the student writes? Capitalization, punctuation, spelling, or spacing? We know capitalization and punctuation are higher order skills, right? And we can tell by the writing that the student is emergent to beginning writer. So what should we really be focused on with them?
Yeah, because I was about to say, because she needs all of these.
Yeah, she needs all of them. But which should be your primary focus if you're conferencing with this kid about writing? Wouldn't do capitalization and punctuation.
I said, I mean, she has a spelling problem, but she only missed the O in the dog. But I said spacing.
Spacing. I would think spacing would come before spelling. So they need to know words are separated by spaces, right, before they're even able to write those words. Yeah, you were right. So spacing, we would focus on spacing with a child who was writing this way. Which of the following best represents a student's writing sample in the emergent writing stage? Use of scribbles with left to right orientation, use of invented spelling, use of capital letters, or use of one-letter labels accompanying pictures?
A.
I'm going to say A too. Let's see if we're right. Yay! See, we know what we're doing. A kindergarten teacher is reviewing students' journal. She notices one student's writing is not legible and the marks do not correspond to letters of the alphabet. Which stage of emergent writing is the student demonstrating? Conventional writing, scribbling, labeling, or invented spelling? So the writing is not
probably the marks do not correspond to letters. Invented spelling.
She notices one student's writing is not legible. She can't read it, and the marks don't correspond to the letters of the alphabet.
Scribbling.
I'm going to say scribbling. Yeah, there we are. See how it helps you when you go back? Yeah. That is what I want you to do on your girl. You just wait. What time is it? I'm trying to control myself on this video. To be most productive during the revising process, students should interact freely, work in small peer groups, set their own pace, or finish within a class period. And you gotta know the stages of the writing process, right? So the revision process comes after.
At the end, it's after like editing.
No, it comes before editing. It's right after drafting. Revising is right in the middle. So it's pre-writing, or planning, writing, then revising, editing, and then drafting. Okay, so the revision is the part where yes, the revision is the part that's less student-centered and more either peer or teacher-centered, where they help the student to revise the thoughts. Someone else, another reader reads it, make sure it makes sense. So to be most productive during the revising process, how should students work?
I think it's work in small peer groups.
It would be work in small peer groups. I think so. Let's look and see before yes. It would be to work in small peer groups, because that's the time at which feedback is essential. You've written the paper, so a lot of times when you read it, if it doesn't flow well, you aren't going to be able to tell that. Someone else, you need a second set of eyes to do that. So the revision process is more centered on the external reader than it is the writer. Okay. Recent studies of the stages of the writing process indicate that drafting is a silent and solitary activity, predominantly dependent upon inspiration, best accomplished by imitating others, or an exploratory and tentative activity. We can
I'm
cut
saying
out.
it's
We can
B.
probably
I'm
cut out
out of B
C
or
and D,
D.
right?
What you said? Take out B. You said
Oh, you.
C and D or C and B?
I said C and B, but you want B to stay?
Well, no. That just clarified my answer. I think it's D.
No, I don't want to clarify your answer. I want you to think through it because other people are probably going to be thinking through this as well.
Well, I said that I thought it was going to be between B and D, but you said B is no, so D.
I didn't say B is no. I asked you if you wanted to take out, or I would take out D.
Well, I think it's D.
D as in dog?
Yeah, D as in dog, only because, because, okay, how I'm thinking is that when you're drafting, that's the beginning, and you're trying to figure out like what you're really gonna be doing and putting into it, and it's gonna have a couple of errors and stuff like that. So the only reason why I think, I said B2 is because it said dependent on their inspiration, and that's when they're thinking. But
yeah,
then
and two, I think I would cut out predominantly dependent on inspiration, because inspiration implies that it's a creative work, and that's not always the type of writing that students are doing. So they may very well be, it may not be an inspiration. It may be a persuasive work, or they might be writing from a prompt, right? The teacher may have already given them a prompt. So it doesn't have to be dependent on the inspiration for you to be able to draft it. So I think it's exploratory and it's tentative. It's the beginning, and there are going to be some changes that happen. So I'd agree with you. D, we were right.
Okay.
Yeah, you did that. You did that. Why don't you go ahead and teach this? Beginning in 4th grade, students must draw evidence from literary or informational text to support which of the following: task, relevance, and research, description, purpose, and task, reflection, research, and analysis, or purpose, description, and reflection. So we're going to go back to the question. Beginning in the 4th grade, students must draw evidence from literary or informational text to support which of the following. So the fact that they said something about 4th grade suggests that the student is, because we expect readers to be readers or fluent by the end of, we expect readers to be fluent by the end of what grade? I can't remember. It's third grade, right? Yeah, 3rd. There you go. But by the end of 3rd grade. And so them saying beginning in 4th grade means that they're almost assuming that the students are fluent readers. So what must they be able to draw evidence from in text to support the following?
I think it's C.
Why?
Because they said informational text, and when I think of informational text, I think like the textbook and stuff like that. And when they're reading those books, when they're reading like literary text or informational text, it gives them things for them to reflect on, that they can research if they want to. But you can also use informational text to use as research or to get research from, and then analysis when you're analyzing something. That's what they're doing when they read those books. So
true. And 2, very good. And 2, if you think about it, we've talked extensively about the fact that from kindergarten to about 3rd grade, students are doing a lot of learning to read. Yeah. Whereas from 3rd grade or 4th grade up, they're doing a lot of reading to learn. So they need to be able to get information from text and synthesize it and analyze it. So yes, you're absolutely correct. Good job.
And I knew that only because my class was a 3rd grade class.
Really? See how
no.
much more this stuff makes sense when you've seen it happening in the classroom. That's why it's really important for you to have those hands-on experiences before going into an exam like this, because it's not enough just to know the definitions. When you've done it, it makes sense to you. A sixth grade teacher has asked students to write a selection of prose in which they analyze the positive and negative aspects of a recent field trip. The best mode of writing for students to use for this assignment would be narrative, reflective, persuasive, or creative. So let's go back to the question. They're in sixth grade. They went on a field trip, and the teacher wants them to analyze the positive and negative aspects of the field trip.
I say persuasive.
What do you think she's wanting them to persuade them to do?
Whether the field trip was good or not.
But who are they persuading? Because if they're deciding whether the field trip was good or bad for them, that would be reflective.
Oh, that's I was gonna say, yeah. Yeah, it's reflective.
So I think reflective. Let's see. Yeah, there we are. We're good. Go back and read the question again, sis.
I am.
What organizational pattern does the author of the following passage use to present the information? A drought has a number of consequences for ranchers. Grass ceases to grow and in some cases dies. A cattle becomes lean and thus brings less cash at the market. And calves are born in a drought. Calves born in a drought have a higher mortality rate. So what organizational pattern is the author using? Cause and effect, sequence, contrast and compare, or problem and solution? Are you choosing between two?
No, I'm rereading the question real quick.
Oh, okay.
Born in a drought. Is it that's cause and effect?
It is cause and effect. Of course it is. And if you look at the first sentence, it says there are a number of consequences for
because
ranchers.
of it.
So yeah, they're going to talk about the consequences of each one of these things happening. So that's cause and effect. Many members of the second grade class have difficulty remembering words that are spelled with the letters I, blank E, and which are spelled with E, EI, IE and EI. Which of the following instructional methods would best help them overcome this problem? Having students identify words containing IE and EI patterns in stories, using word walls with IE and EI patterns, assigning IE and EI dictionary activities, or making flashcards of words containing IE and EI patterns. This one is kind of difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's
I'm taking away C.
Yeah.
So they're having difficulty remembering which words have the pattern.
I say B.
So which
using
one would
a word
best?
wall.
Okay, and the flashcards would just be rote memorization, and that's not what we want. Identifying words that have IE and EI in the stories, yes, they can see them, but will they remember them? B, I think B as well. Yay!
Yay!
Oh, I have so much to say to you. A third grade teacher asked the students to partner and read a literary selection. The teacher walks around the room and stops to question each pair of students about the story. Which type of assessment is the teacher using?
Informal.
Informal, yeah. That was an easy one. A kindergarten teacher prefaces reading to the class by pointing out the title, author, illustrator, and title page. Which skill is this teacher most likely developing with the students? Generating questions, expanding vocabulary, concepts about books, or comprehension of text?
Comprehension of text.
Go back and read that question again.
Okay. The kindergarten teacher prefer reading to the concepts about books.
Can they see? I wonder if they can see me rolling my eyes at you. Remember concepts about books, the concepts about print, exam, that assessment. Kids don't need to be able to read to be able to do it.
Okay.
They want to know if they know the concepts. So the little ones who've been exposed to literature, who have a concept of books, are going to know that they go from left to right. They're the ones that flip from left to right. They try to tell the story. They point to words. It may not be what the words are saying, but because they know that print carries meaning, they're able to point to that print to make the story. A sixth grade language arts teacher is looking for an assessment tool to use with his students' performance products this year. He would like a tool that has scoring standards composed of model answers to score the task. The best tool for this purpose would be a criterion reference test, a norm reference test, a portfolio, or a rubric. Okay, so let's go back to the question. He's a sixth grade language arts teacher looking for an assessment tool to use with his students' performance products this year. He would like to use a tool that has scoring standards composed of model answers to score the tasks. What would be the best tool for this purpose?
What do they mean by like model answers?
I think he would have something that would show that like if you had a scoring guide, maybe. Oh, she's gone. Okay, she didn't. I'm thinking a scoring. She asked what would the scoring standard have for model answers. And thinking about model answers, I think that would be like your scoring guide where you use what would be an appropriate answer and what might be, you know, close to the answer, and what answer you might give that might not contain any of the information. So I would think of it more as I was about to say it, a rubric. I would think of it more as a rubric than anything else. Perhaps a portfolio, but I'm going to say a rubric. Yeah, because it already has the answers that would be considered correct. However, if you give an answer and there are some parts of it that may or may not be correct, you may receive some of the points. So I think the more appropriate answer would be a rubric for this question, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and stop right here because Monty has jumped off, and I think there are about 9 or 10 more questions left. Oh, there she is. There are about 9 or 10 more questions left that you yourself can go and practice. Again, any of the resources that I provided, the phonograms, the sight words, any of those resources, you are welcome to email me. I would be more than happy to send out. Shoot me an email. I've got some one-pagers for each one of the topics that we talked about. They're little newsletters, but it's all of the information in either on a front and back side of a paper, so they're really easy to go back and reference. But they'd be a very good study guide for you and reference for you. My email address is Cheron, CHERON .Davis, DAVIS @FAMU.edu. Again, Cheron.Davis @FAMU.edu. You're always welcome to email me if you have any questions about the test. I love to know your successes. I'd love to know if you come to a question that you just don't understand what happened. Please feel free to reach out to me via email or on Facebook at Cheron Hunter Davis. I'm on Facebook as well, and you can even call me at 555. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, I'm back, Dr. Davis.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was going to be rubric. So
you didn't think it? She did not think that was. Well, after I jump off of this this call, I'm going to tell you why that one is rubric.
Okay, so you're ending?
Yes, right. I'm going to end here.
Okay.
For everyone who's watching, I'm going to go ahead and end, and then I'm going to call her and tell her why the answer is rubric. Okay. All right. Have a lovely day, everyone, and make sure you pass that exam. You can do it.
Thank you.
Thanks.